Yeah. So my question is, so I'll give the backstory on this. Um, this is a client that came to me with an existing website. Um, the original setup of his website was like no upfront cost. It was just a monthly fee, ongoing and kind of never ending. And it was, upwards of, I think, because he was never really 100% transparent with me, just under $1,000 a month or something like that. And it included, SEO services that were not really definable or repeatable by the client. And there was nothing really known about what was being done. So it was hard to figure out, what was included with those services. When I started talking to him, he had realized that he was paying that amount for quite some time, and it was supposed to go down eventually. So then he talked to the agency and it went down, but they were still doing some ongoing SEO services. So then I finally migrated him over to my just basic hosting plan because that's all he needed. It's literally a brochure site with sparse content on service pages for a construction industry, a contractor. And nothing was really being updated or optimized that I could tell. Maybe some like interlinking between pages, maybe some changing of words on pages, but not like developing more content or anything like that. It didn't seem very strategic to me. But what I did notice the other day was in Search Console, because I was just looking at traffic and I just wanted to compare what traffic was doing now compared to prior to the migration. Because he did state the other day that he's just getting less form submissions and stuff like that. I was given access to Google Analytics and Google Console from the previous agency who set that up, but there were no goals or anything that was being monitored other than just the tag inserted on the website. So when I was looking in Google Console, I noticed that there were these other pages that I didn't notice from the front end, and they were like, service, the URL was like service dash county and state, right? So they were like location pages, but specific to each one of the services. So it's like kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, and each one, city dash state. So I was just wondering about this strategy and like being able to really analyze my findings here, and but more so just the strategy of really, did they have a different strategy that they were working on in creating these location pages and they were going to build some navigation to lead to them, or were they purely just tucking them behind the curtain and letting them drive in traffic? Because they did show traffic prior to the migration, but zero traffic after migration. So I'm curious, maybe if you had some insight on what they were doing or what type of strategy that is.
Okay, good question. First of all, I want to commend you, like looking in Search Console and finding these. Like that's the kind of stuff that the clients don't even know exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why looking so frequently in there and taking time to deep dive uncovers these kind of little nuggets.
Yeah.
That otherwise we would have totally missed, right? Because if it's not in the menu or anything like that, you might not even anticipate it. So that's good find. Second, are these pages still alive?
They are.
Okay. And so do they each have forms on them?
They do not.
What is the call to action on these pages?
I would say nothing other than, the phone number in the footer. Okay. And it's not a call to action. It's just a reference. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no other place like call us for these services.
And is Google Analytics on these pages as well?
As far as I know, I'll double check that.
Okay.
But it is a WordPress website, and I do have Yoast installed. So yes.
Okay. So yeah, if you use Sitekit, then it should be on every page. Yeah.
Yeah, this one came with a Google Analytics plugin, and I just maintained that.
Sure.
The way it was set up.
Okay. So these things I just wanted to check first, right?
I did notice like linking to other pages on the website. If it talked about a certain service, then it would link to that main service page where it talked about that service or whatnot.
So if it was kitchen remodeling in Fort Mill, it would link to a kitchen remodeling page. And if it was kitchen remodeling in York, it would link to the kitchen remodeling page. Okay.
Yeah. And I've noticed a couple of times, not all on all pages, but just in random places, if they're mentioning the company name, they'll link directly to the contact page.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, this is a SEO strategy, right? And it's just basically building locally focused pages that purely exist for the search engines, right? This is what Google calls a doorway page.
Okay.
Technically, doorway pages are against Google's guidelines.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you can think about it it makes sense in that Google doesn't really want to serve up a page whose only existence is to rank for a specific phrase, city, state, right? So it is an old school strategy. Used to be, this is what we used to do in SEO, and we were accused of destroying the web by creating crappy content, right? Well, some people still use the strategy, and sometimes it still works, right?
Yeah.
And it has to do with how much effort was put into those pages as they were created. So if it's a circumstance where all the pages are identical, but they just change the city and state, then I'd suggest they probably aren't very effective. One or two might be effective, but only when there's no competition.
Mm-hmm.
If they happen to pick a city and a state and a service for which no one else in the world has built a page for that, it'll work. But that's not a really good strategy, because you got to hope that you're the only one who built a page for kitchen remodeling in York, South Carolina, or whatever, right?
Right.
Newport, South Carolina. So that is what, and I've seen some fly-by-night SEO companies, and their whole SEO payment is every month we'll build you a new page like this. And they just,
and that's against, you said it's against Google's guidelines, right?
It is. It is
so if you
against
get
the
caught,
guidelines.
You're, what could happen? So if you get caught, what would happen? Like if Google catches you,
best case scenario, Google ignores the page. Worst case scenario would reflect entirely on your site, and Google would consider your site low quality because you had a lot of these doorway pages. I've known of websites that literally did thousands of these. Wow. They got banned.
Wow.
But that's not typical, because unless you're a large company, you're probably not going to have the resources to build thousands of these.
Yeah.
So, so that's the crappy way to do it.
Yeah.
There is a good way to do it, right? Of course, the good way takes time and resources, right?
You mean it's not easy?
It's, oh my gosh, it's totally, not easy. Like, you have to take, and we've kind of talked about the idea of locally focused pages before, where just as long as the content on each of these pages is unique and helpful, then it's okay. But if it doesn't have much content, it's just the same template, just a couple words are different, you're kind of wasting everybody's time by producing them. You might be able to say to the client, look, I built all these pages for you. But, and every once in a while, in Search Console, it might get an impression or two. It might even get a click or two. It might even show up as ranking for a phrase in Search Console. But short of conversions, we don't know if they're really valuable to the client, right? That's why I wanted to know about calls to action, because if the client's concerned that they suddenly got less leads, could these have been producing leads? But if there's no clear call to action, it's possible that some of these might have brought in some traffic, which might, for some place that no one else has thought to build a page for that city and state and service. And by law of large numbers, if you build enough of them, you're going to have a significant number of leads. Pardon me. But so yeah, it is a strategy, but it sounds like it's executed poorly.
Especially there's no call to action. I mean, like that's the whole,
Right.
Whole point of a page is to have a call to action right there.
Even if it's just a phone number.
Yeah, exactly.
Even
Even
if
if it's like a
just
phone number to call. Yeah.
Right. You know,
You need some type of call to action. And if you're
Right.
not measuring that, then how do you know what good the page is doing? Or maybe you didn't put it in because you don't want to know.
right. And that might be the case for a lower quality SEO company. Might be like, I really don't care if it works. I just need to tell the client.
Tell them I'm making these pages. Yeah.
Right.
Collect a low enough amount so they don't complain, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they complain, you can say, well, look at all I did.
Yeah.
Would you like me to do more? You can pay me more and I can do them faster.
Yeah.
But so does that answer the first part of your question?
Yeah, totally. I'm just pulling up one of the pages here now just to double check if their call to action is just almost like a banner section. Need help? Let us know what you need, and a button to contact us. And then they do have a quick contact form in the footer.
Okay. So those could have, by again, law of large numbers, by the fact that they might be the only page on the internet for some of these services. Google has no alternative but to serve this page up, right? But I'd suggest that for the more competitive cities and states and services, these pages probably don't do jack.
Yeah.
But analytics would know, and unfortunately, if they didn't set up conversion tracking, again, probably because they don't want to know if it works.
Yeah.
Because then they'd be accountable for the results. So that might be one interesting thing to do, is to first set up conversion tracking on these. And then collect some data, and then start to systematically go through each and make each better. Just a little bit at a time, you know? Yeah. Now, some you may determine are not worth salvaging. For instance, let's say they have a series of pages for cities that are for kitchen remodeling, and another series of pages for kitchen remodeler. You know, we know that that's the same thing in Google's mind, but that's the slippery slope of this strategy, is that, well, now we need to build for remodeler and remodeling and kitchen contractor, right? Yeah. And that's really all kind of the same thing. So you could do the keyword research, figure out, are we duplicating, and then consolidate them. That will alone help them perform better. And then with the consolidated ones, start writing unique content. So, you know, go, and we've talked about this before, where the idea with a local landing page is to say something unique that's only unique on your page about that area. And that's tough. Because if we're talking about a service like kitchen remodeling, what's different about kitchen remodeling in this town versus that town? That's hard.
Yeah.
Now, you might be able to do some research and figure out, well, this town is more affluent. And so for them, it's about, the messaging becomes about entertainment and impressing your clients and impressing your boss. But this town might be a little bit more rural. So maybe it's more about having the room to entertain your family.
Maybe the materials each one would use.
Right. One might be more interested in less expensive options. One might be more expensive.
Yeah.
to have that baked into the content. You know, from our experience working as kitchen remodelers in York County, South Carolina, we know that you just want some room for your family to come enjoy a big meal. And that's what we're specialized. We're a family-owned, business. You could really riff on this whole thing. But if you're in like where I live in Baxter Village, Fort Mill, South Carolina, it's like snooty Yankees. I don't give a crap about our family. Like, get the hell out. Right? So it's like, it's really not about, it's about Instagrammable, picturesque, beautiful food that we can brag about our friends on Instagram, even though we don't even like it. And so, so that suddenly that content becomes helpful. It's actual marketing content. It's something you're proud of, the client can be proud of, rather than, lowest common denominator. And then, Google will reward you for that. So Tim, you and I talked yesterday real quickly about an insight I had from Curious Ants, where I realized that the low quality content was holding back the entire website. So the short version of that is I used to use automated transcripts and we'd publish them with videos. And my goal was, if I can get a little bit of traffic from those, that's great, knowing the transcripts were terrible. Well, John Mueller recently made us mention that if we see your website is full of low quality content, we're going to consider your whole website low quality. Mm-hmm. So I went through the entire site, purged complete transcripts, completely removed them. Others I had completely rewritten. And from that point forward, we took the time and effort to not, if we can't write a complete transcript, write a summary that's unique. And already we're seeing more traffic. And that's because Google, according to John Mueller, Google seems to be thinking, oh, your website's low quality because you're just using this automated transcript stuff, and it doesn't even make sense. But the same thing's true about some of this potential for these landing pages. Some of these might be reflecting poorly. And although maybe he is getting less leads. Without objective measurements, if no one was tracking conversions, he doesn't know that. It just feels that way. It might be a more reflection of his feeling than objectivity. That's why step 2 is set up the goals, right? So that we can start making the conversation objective rather than subjective. But now you'll have the data to be able to say, well, look, maybe it is down, but it's up since last month.
Right.
And it's up since the month after that. So, then we can talk that way. But does that kind of help take this, understand the strategy, how to make it better and more effective for the client?
Yeah. So a couple of questions, so I know like the strategy of a location page, but I always think to, obviously work it in from the front end too, from the user perspective, to show those locations, and to have the pages navigable, so is it because those pages are not directly linked in the navigation that is how Google recognizes them as a doorway page?
No. So Google will use the navigation to help find pages, but it doesn't use the navigation for rank. Mm-hmm. It uses internal links for rank, but not navigation. So you can get away with finding ways to link to those pages from within your content and building those internal links, and Google will find those pages and value those internal links from within content more highly than navigation links.
Okay.
Because it would be confusing, and the other way to think about it is it would be very confusing to the user if they found a menu that included hundreds of pages, each page different for the service and the city and the state, right? And that would be, so then you're putting the onus on the visitor to figure out which city and state and service they want. And that's just, it's not a good user experience, but it also really doesn't look great.
So let me make sure I understand. So what are you saying that if you're doing these pages, let's say you're saying kitchen remodeler X city A, city B, city C. So you're saying that you should or should not have them in a navigational menu?
I'd say you probably don't want them in a navigational menu.
Okay.
If you
we're
have,
talking about navigation like at the top, right?
right,
Okay.
right. Because it depends. It depends on a couple things. That's why I say probably. If you only have a couple, it might not be confusing.
Uh-huh.
If you have a half dozen cities and states for every one of the services you offer, that's going to be, let's say you have 12 cities and 12 services, that's 144 pages. That's a heck of a navigation.
Yeah.
Right? So it would be better to pick your main city, town, whatever that might be, Charlotte, North Carolina, and have that the focus of your main site. And then if you then decided you really needed a page that was for another city in another state in another service, then I would probably link to that from the Charlotte, North Carolina page for that service. Are you in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you need kitchen remodeling? Well, that's what we're about. Blah, 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 blah. Aren't we awesome? I'll get some pictures. We're great. Oh, are you in York, South Carolina? Look at our South Carolina page to learn more about what we've done in York, South Carolina. And now they go to the York, South Carolina page. It's because we took the time to build it in a way that we're proud of. It has unique value and has something to contribute to the conversation. We're not ashamed if someone stumbles on it by navigating it, but we'd only navigate it from the internal link of the content.
Okay.
We wouldn't want it in the necessarily, right? And frankly, maybe a better way to do this is almost do case studies. Since if this is a remodeling thing, you could almost do a case study. Here are some houses we've done in this town. Here's some pictures of them. Here's some unique challenges we had. Here's, some things about that town that are relating to the service that we did, right? Whatever. If you approach it from a case study perspective, no one would balk at it. But if you're just creating it to be an SEO doorway page, that's going to be a pretty crappy page.
So can you define, how would you define an SEO doorway page? What does that technically mean?
So the way Google defines it, it's a page that solely exists for SEO by trying to rank for a very specific page, commonly for a very specific location as well. That's what Google would consider a doorway page. Now, what's the difference between that and a case study page? Maybe intent, right? And the time we take to make it a real case study for that service in that city and state.
Yeah.
Right.
I would think too that the case study, somebody living in that area, if you were showing this specific pictures from houses, that they've done, those are actual customers. Whereas if you're just doing a doorway page, is that more kind of like almost just changing the city and state out, not a lot of work.
Right. Yeah, that's the distinction I'm making here. This strategy is bad if done bad. But this strategy can be done really well and effectively. That's not just it. That frankly is good, whether or not there's such a thing as Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. If there were no Google, having a bunch of case studies mentioning the towns and the services you provided in those towns would be very helpful to users. So Google wouldn't balk at that. But if it's the same page template, the same pictures, the same basic words, and just a new town, a new service, and then, that's just not going to be great. Not going to help. If Google didn't exist, you would never do that, right? You would never do that.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between what I'm saying as a case study page versus a doorway page.
So if I'm doing a comparison in Search Console with this, and I see that the impressions went way down, the clicks are relatively similar,
Mm-hmm.
and the average page rank is lower,
Right.
in general. Is there any help that you can guide me with to interpreting that, and maybe something else to look for to see why those clicks might have gone down completely?
So I thought you said the clicks were pretty much consistent
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the clicks were pretty much consistent.
and the rank
But
maybe down slightly.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
But impressions were down significantly.
Significantly.
Okay.
Yep.
When the rank went down, did the page fall to the second page of Google? Was it in the 10 plus ranking when the impressions went down? So that's hard to do from a big picture, but if you can look at a couple of individual pages where the impressions went down, did the rank drop to the second page? Because the impressions are how many eyeballs saw it in the search results. And so if we jump to the second page, your impressions are going to drop because you've just dropped the second page.
Gotcha.
So that might be a reason for drop in impressions. But clicks are about the same, which might suggest that it was kind of teetering on that spot. And by just jumping from the bottom of the first page to the top of the second didn't really affect a lot of clicks. It just affected a lot of eyeballs, which is what impression decline versus click decline means. Now, there always are external factors, like Google changed the algorithm and maybe suddenly these pages were identified and Google kicked it out. It could be, was this website on WordPress before you migrated it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And no plugin changes after the migration?
Yeah, some security plugins.
Okay.
Site speed, I noticed is something that I'm working on as well.
Yeah. It's always hard to rule out Google algorithm changes. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I tend to blame myself rather than blame Google when I encounter something like this. But I have just anecdotally noticed sometime around January, a lot of my sites impressions went down.
Yeah, there was an algorithm update then, and I know that especially for this is a local business.
Right.
So yeah.
And I'm not an algorithm chaser, right? Like there are people who obsess on it and freak out. And
I just really be aware of it and see what happens when the dust settles is what I kind of think.
Yeah. So that's what I would look at in Search Console to help identify problems. But I think rather than you can drive yourself a little batty trying to figure out why. It's probably a better use of mind space to put that headspace into improving rather than understanding what went wrong. Because you could really drive yourself a little crazy.
Yeah.
With that.
Well, this is a client that isn't able to find the budget for improvement right now, and is just budgeting for, I'm trying to say this kindly, just budgeting for a basic web care plan. Right. And I'm literally just providing that service to the best of my ability. And improvements aren't included. So
So
it's kind of fun to dive in a little bit and
yeah,
study this, you know.
yeah, I don't want to discourage you from doing that. Did the URL change in any way?
No,
No HTTPS or triple W changes?
no.
Okay. Did this all happen around the time you made the migration off their server onto yours?
Like the drop off.
Yeah.
That's what I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out by looking at the analytics and looking at Search Console, is to
Sure.
be able to actually analyze that. And I'm looking at it and I'm wondering the same thing, you know, so I'm not sure.
Because I mean, can you look back in your records and see when you pulled the trigger on this transition
It was like March 26th. Yeah.
of last year?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that around the time when the drop happened, or has the drop happened recently? Because if you're looking in Search Console, by default, you're looking at 3 months back.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the last 12 months.
Okay. And it dropped around March or after March?
I guess I need to look at the last like 16 months to see prior to that.
Because if it was around the time of the migration, then it might be that it could be something as simple as they were linking to it from their website as a client. Go look at our clients, that link no longer exists. But if that was like one of the few links to the website and it's not longer propping it up, that could
Just
be a
could be
problem.
so many things, right? Yeah.
Right. That's what, that's what makes this hard.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's a year is a long time in the SEO world, right? So there have been there are 200 algorithm changes to Google in a year. And it could just be simply what was okay a year ago is no longer okay. Like what has happened in the SEO world last year? Number one, Google rolled out Web Core Vitals for mobile as a ranking signal. What has also happened? Google has moved more sites to mobile first. What else has happened? Google has made Web Core Vitals for desktop a ranking signal. What else has happened? There have been several local search changes. What else has happened? So that's like a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. Two, SEO is a long-term strategy, but if you dial it back and you're not doing anything and you just set it and forget it, you are going to have attrition over time. It is going to happen. If you don't keep up with it, even if you're not doing much, you're not going to, and that's because Google likes fresh new websites, likes websites it believes are up to date. And if nothing has been changed on the site in a year, Google might be going, was this business still together? And less likely to serve it to people because it's not quite convinced. And so that's why things like regular blogging are really, really helpful, at least to send that signal to Google. Hey, still here, still in business, still working on something, Yeah,
right.
But if it's just a gradual decline over a year, it could just be that no one's been doing anything.
Right.
And if he made the decision to stop, well, it sounds like he made the decision to move away from that company, but what little they might have been doing to help isn't even helping anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And so I noticed one of my clients during the pandemic dialed back their SEO campaign. Right financial decision. No one knew what was going to happen. Scary. A year and a half into the pandemic, they're starting to feel the impact of dialing back.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like, listen, you gotta redouble. Like you gotta re-up. You can't just walk away. Yes, SEO is long-term invest in your website, but if you don't maintain your car and change its oil, it won't last forever, no matter how good of quality car you bought. And if we neglect it and we don't, it's going to slowly fall apart, and that very well could be what's going on.
Yeah. And if everybody else, if your competition is not dialing it back and they're continuing to stay up and do things and stay regular, then obviously they'll take precedent.
Yep. Yeah. Why would Google serve a website that hasn't changed in a year?
Yeah.
When other websites are still relevant and growing and active over that same time period. And
yeah,
so that could be another thing. But you're looking in the right place to start to draw these conclusions. Right?
Yeah. So and I think taking a look back at the 16-month view, and I don't want to take all that. I think Trisha had a question too, so I don't want to take this whole time.
I'm good. No, good.
Looking back, like I can see a ramp up of impressions at the end of 2020, all through 2021. It's just on a slightly upward trend, and that continues past the migration into May, about mid-May, and it starts to drop off pretty heavily toward July, and it's been about flat since then.
You know what it is?
What?
Oh, what happened last summer in the world? Everybody got released from the pandemic and said,
Oh,
I am getting out of my freaking house.
yeah.
And they stopped spending money on renovations, which is what everybody spent their money on during the pandemic.
That's
because
true.
they're sick of looking at their own walls, and then went to Disney World. And then got and then it got Delta, and then had to come back in, right? So,
yeah.
So this is where Google Trends is an amazing tool. So let's do a little Google Trends analysis. I'm going to go and share my screen. And we might have, so here's Google Trends. This is a great place to find this kind of information. Can confirm our hypothesis. So let's just take home improvement. And what we don't want is home improvement, the sitcom, right? Although a great might be. The topic is what we want, and not the search term, right? We're not looking for data on the search term in this case. We want to know about the topic of home improvement, because that's to include other terms besides home improvement. So the home improvement in the United States, let's just say a place that's close to my heart, Kansas. So if, let's say, your client is a home improvement person serving Kansas, we can even zoom in and say, my hometown of Wichita, Kansas, right? And this is the metropolitan area of Wichita, Kansas. And you can see since March of last year, up, it looks like it's kind of trending up, but we can then go to like past 5 years. And we can get a little bit better view.
Yeah, there's the, yeah.
So this spike is, come on. June last year, spike, then dip during Delta, and then everybody's back home at the end of August for Delta, and then down for the holidays. because no one wants to start a home improvement project in the holidays. Back
No more
up.
company.
Oh, interesting. Back up in December, and then
The February.
February again. So
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting for this
Yeah.
metropolitan area of the Wichita, Hutchinson, Kansas area.
Yeah.
We can just look at Kansas. Same kind of thing.
Mhm.
Spike, it's re-spiked again recently, but it was down significantly. But
Mhm.
you know, for this is 5 years. So like pandemic started around here,
Mhm.
and that's the most it was for years before that. Look at that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
went down a little bit, but then when it started going up, and then drop. So I don't know if that confirms our theory very much, but this is something that can help us understand, because remember, SEO responds to demand, it doesn't create demand. So if people are going to spending their money on Disney World tickets rather than home improvement tickets, we can't create demand for a service. And this might help explain. So this is a pretty steep decline from August of last year
Mhm.
to November of last
November.
year, right?
Yeah.
Now it seems to be recovered, at least in this state. See, Alabama, that's interesting. That's totally a little different, right? All right, spike, drop, but still back up again.
Mhm.
But you can just see the pandemic
Yeah, it really
grew
took off.
significantly in the pandemic.
Yeah, and I had heard that, but it's interesting to then like look at the actual trends and see.
Right. So why don't we just look at the state of Georgia? Oh, this is the country of Georgia.
Oh, I was like, that looks weird. Oh. Mhm.
In typical, there we go, United States.
Okay. Oh.
So typical American fashion, I just assume that Georgia is. So what
Yeah.
we can do is we can
Click
click
on
on a
the-
state,
Yeah.
and now we're looking at the state of Georgia. And here's really cool. We can say, okay, here's the Atlanta metropolitan area. So it was below an interest of around 75 always for years.
And then all of a sudden,
Pandemic
COVID
happened,
hit.
whoop,
Boom. Yeah.
and then down, never recovered. In the Atlanta, Georgia area, it never recovered. Starting to recover once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
but
Never got up to that
yeah.
100. Yeah.
And we can play with this like.
So, well, I have a question here. Why? So you said topic and not search.
Because we want to know about the topic of home improvement, in this case, not limited to one very specific term. So let's compare.
Okay. So,
Home improvement search term. Let's compare these. We can add 2 terms to compare. Oh, interesting. Home improvement as a search term, not as a topic. Look at that.
yeah.
Well,
I guess so. I guess my question is, I'm kind of confused on what the difference is in the two.
Okay.
Like,
So search term is people going to Google and using the term
Yeah.
home improvement.
okay.
Home improvement as a topic is people who are interested in the topic of home improvement generally. So it may include the search term home improvement, but it may be searching for things that don't include that specific phrase, but it could be like bathroom remodeling. It could be landscaping. These are all parts of home improvement that aren't necessarily the word home improvement.
Okay, so I might look in for a kitchen remodel. I'm not going to put home improvement. Then it would be under the topic.
Kitchen remodeler, topic.
Oh, interesting.
Zip.
Remodeling. Hmm.
Search term. Some. Kitchen remodeling, search term or topic. Let's do.
That drop on that home improvement search term seems to be
Yeah.
in
That's-
correlation with my analytics.
Your analytics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, and that makes sense because kitchen remodeling is a specific, is more specific than
Mhm.
home improvement. Now, I wrote an article on Reliable Acorn about this, where you can export this data into an Excel file
Yeah.
and use some Excel magic to average it out and compare it to your traffic.
Oh, Tim, that would be interesting for what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find that.
You are a magician with your Excel capabilities.
This is not so scary. All right, let's see. How is customer demand affects your SEO results? Here's a graph example of this.
Wow.
The blue graph is traffic. The red graph is demand in the main topic of that traffic. And yellow is demand in the brand name. Google, in this client case, the client has been identified as an entity in Google, and so they have a search term query for their own name. And so you can see here, like here we go, in October of 2020, there's a spike up in demand. Does that mean David's a really good SEO person and he can make that go happen? Really? No, it's probably something happened industry-wide that made that spike.
Wow.
Oh, David went back in November. Does that mean David didn't do any work in November? Not necessarily. Maybe he didn't, but not necessarily, because demand went down. Demand returned in January. Here's traffic went up even though demand didn't. David must have worked really hard in February. No, that's a smaller month, right? But this article kind of outlines how to do it.
Can you put that that URL in the chat for me, please?
Oh, didn't put it in there for everybody. Okay, here we go.
Okay, thank you.
So play around with that.
Yeah,
You
thanks.
kind of have to do some averages and stuff like that, but I with some clients I run this every month just because I want, they're so seasonally demanded and I want to be able to say, oh, it's the off season. Some clients are, I have a client that's so big that if they're in the news, I look like I'm doing a really good job. In reality, it's because people are talking about them.
Mhm. Well, that's cool. That
Yeah.
was really helpful. Sorry we didn't get to your question, Tricia.
No, I think we had talked about it kind of before. We're good.
Okay.
No, that was very interesting and helpful, David.
Okay. Well, I hope that helps give you some things to look at, Tim, because that is a scary question to have. But if you're able to bring it into objective data, right, it helps the client understand a little bit more.
Yeah. And just being able to guide them toward understanding and a solution to make improvements.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's too bad of a job that they've done with it, but I do just still wonder why and how to determine like why the pages just aren't, those particular pages just aren't getting any traffic at this point. Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, if you can nail down the date, you can, and if the traffic declined at the date of the transition, then you know has something to do with the transition. If it's after, then it suggests something after, like an algorithm change happened. But there's clearly a lot of opportunity on those pages. Some of them you're going to kill, some of them you're going to save, and some of them you're going to improve. And that's a great way to do that.
Yeah.
But he needs to understand the value. He can't just build a page, walk away.
Yeah. This is a really good discussion. I appreciate it.